Just how does one become an expat? What things must you do first? Gain travel experience?
And we did it with kids, we did it with luggage we were carrying, like we did it the hardest possible thing for the longest possible time.
Search for the ideal location. Live abroad in many different places.
I lived in Texas for a long time and lived abroad quite a bit.
Western Nicaragua.
Las Peñitas, Nicaragua. Part 1 of an exceptional expat story.
I've spent the past year and a half driving my motorcycle through Latin America, living in each country for a minimum of 6 weeks. This has been one of the most difficult projects I've ever embarked upon, and I really hope you enjoy all this content coming at you now. It is 2:30 on Friday, December 8th. We find ourselves at the famous Peñitas Beach, the beach right next to León, major capital city of the Department of León. And we are looking at the pretty much empty beach on actually a holiday. Strangely enough, I did not expect it to be like this. I was thinking that this place would be just packed full of people because it is a day off, national holiday. But this is a good looking beach. Looks like it's a bit more populated over off in that corner over there. We are in front of a place I was recommended to stop at, which is called, I think, Jake's on the Beach was the name of it. Therefore, I'm gonna try and do my interview here with the one and only Scott. Lives in Nicaragua, the famous YouTuber, and we're going to be having this at his new restaurant that he's going to be inaugurating, or has already inaugurated, but he is opening. He did the soft opening recently, so let's see if he's around. Eighth of December, there is a traffic jam. We've made Beach Road, crossing over Jake's on the Beach, and whatever this is, Casa Almenda. People are waiting in line for something. I'm not sure what it is. Wonder what they'll say. Disculpa, señor, ¿para qué están haciendo fila? ¿Para qué es esa fila?
¿Y dónde está la bolsa? En esa bolsa de comida.
¿Dan comida ahí? Ah, okay. Es como un regalo de la Virgen o algo.
No.
¿Tiene que cantar?
No.
No, así canta. Ah, got it. They're getting a bag of food, I guess, for free or something. So that's nice. I am very happy to be joined by the very famous and talented person that lives here on the western side of Nicaragua, where I currently am doing my videos for Generic Expats. Now we're going to be meeting this friendly fellow right here, getting a bit of his story and seeing what he has to tell us about this very unique and undiscovered country. All right, so let's go ahead and get his main details. Let's get your name, where you're from, how old you are, and how long you've been living here in Nicaragua.
All right, well, I'm ScottAlanMiller. I am originally from upstate New York in the Rochester, Buffalo area. I lived in Texas for a long time and lived abroad quite a bit. I'm 47, and I originally moved to Nicaragua in 2015, was here for a little while, moved to Europe after that. And then during COVID, we decided, my wife and I and our kids decided we wanted to move back here, that Nicaragua really spoke to us and was the place that we wanted to be, like it just fit our needs. So we've been back almost 3 years continuously now, but over a span of 8 years, we've been in and out of the country.
Okay, so your first trip was as a tourist. Did you think of coming here to like just visit, or did you think it would be maybe a place that you would end up living in?
We kind of had this idea that maybe we wanted to live somewhere, but we didn't really have a good concept of where we wanted to go. It was early on in us living abroad. So we had been living in Panama, which I absolutely loved. Panama's amazing. And we had a good short stint in Panama. I had to return to the US for work for a little while. And when we were done, we said, you know what? Panama was fantastic. We need more of Central America. And Panama is not really Central America, but we wanted more of that kind of region. And so let's not go back to Panama. And Costa Rica didn't really speak to us. It's too touristy, it's too well known, and it was too close. We had lived really close to the border. So I said, well, we had always had like this idea that Nicaragua had like something interesting going on. It was fairly close. It was like the next logical step. It was affordable. And so my wife's like, well, I could start searching for something. I said, yeah, take a look, see what you find. And she found this beautiful house, Casa Los Arcos, in Granada. And she sent it to me, and it's like beautiful pool in the living room. And it was perfect. It was in the tourist zone. And I'm like, get it. Let's just rent that place and figure this out. And we ended up not falling in love with Granada, but fell in love with the country. And so we weren't confident at that point that we wanted to live here, but we really knew we wanted to live somewhere. We kept exploring. And then after going to a number of countries, eventually we said, you know what? I think Nicaragua, but not Granada, is where we need to be. And now we're out west, quite far from Granada. And it's been fantastic.
Let's stop right there because I currently am living in Granada, and I want to know why you didn't like Granada.
So Granada is a nice city. Like, I don't want to say it's not. And to all the people in Nicaragua who live there, like, Granada's cool. The thing about Granada, one is it's a much smaller city. It's half the size of Leon. So there's just a lot less to it. And it's a very touristy city. And that's great if you're here for a short bit of time. You're going to get a lot of access to things really quickly, and it's more central. So you can get to the capital easily, you can get to Masaya easily, you can get to Laguna de Apoyo. All that stuff's like really close. That's fantastic. And it's got the ferry to the island. But if you live, especially downtown, and it's your lifestyle living in Granada, the thing that we found is that one, everything's more expensive. There's a great variety of restaurants, but they cost double what they do here. Not quite, but a lot.
50% more.
At least, yeah. But they do have great variety and wonderful like evenings. But because there's so many tourists driving the economy in town, there's no nightlife of significance after the restaurants close. So this is completely different than what we wanted. We wanted fewer restaurants, a lot more nightlife. Here, everything's open until 4 a.m. It's a party every night. It's amazing. Granada kind of shuts down. They're getting a little bit better, but it very much shuts down. And living in the tourist zone, we found that we were treated as tourists all the time. We never integrated. We never met people. We met a few expats who were like long-term people living there. They were cool. Like, that's great. But we never became part of Granada. We were always just more gringos living in the zone. And that was fine, but you were very much a part. And living in other parts of Nicaragua, basically any other part of Nicaragua except for San Juan del Sur, you really are like, oh, you're this unique gringo, you're this unique expat, but why are you here? Now you're part of our community. You don't have that oil and water thing that Granada has because they're so used to it. All these people pass through, they'll go away, we'll still be here. But out here in Leon, for example, really quickly we made lots of friends, we became part of the community. Like, people recognize us as part of the community. We participate differently. It's a totally different vibe. And it's not that Leon is cool. It's just that Granada has this so many tourist thing that but we love going there for like a weekend.
So I'm going to give my little 2 cents on that, and 100% agree with you. I have lived in places exactly like what you mentioned. Rio de Janeiro, Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, Cancun in Mexico. I absolutely love the place, hated living there. Hated living there, being treated with this attitude that buy this right now, buy this excursion. You need to go do this. And I'm like, I'm going to the bank, or I'm going to the gym right now. Like, I don't really want to, go on a boat cruise around the islands of these lake. That's like, I'm cool for right now. So anyways, yeah, I totally understand. That makes sense to me. I actually chose the place because of location. I would have chosen Leon had I known what I know now.
Leon is really, for those who are looking at traveling to Nicaragua, Granada is a great home base. Leon is a beautiful city. I love living here. It's very livable as a city, but it is remote. If you want to explore Western Nicaragua, of course, it's the capital of Western Nicaragua, right? It's the heartland. And there's only Leon, its satellite cities, in Chinandega, and its satellite city, and that's it. And so this little area, you want to hit all this, absolutely Leon is your place. But if you want to see like Nicaragua as a whole, Granada's your best home base as a tourist who needs a little bit of infrastructure. And if you're like being a local, Managua is the heart of the country. And it's amazing to me. I'm always amazed by how many people are scared of Managua. Like, I'm not going to go there. But for some reason, I'm also amazed by every person who's like, I'm moving and I want to move to Managua. And I'm like, what made you choose Managua? I feel like I'm the only person who likes it, but a lot of people actually choose it and they never look at anything else. And I'm like, but I guess they just look at the capital and the big city and say, that's where I'm going to go. But most expats are like, anywhere but Managua. And really, it's a nice city. It's just, it's unique.
I was pleasantly surprised by it. Managua itself was exactly what you said. Like, people give it this horrible name. I drove the roads. The roads are amazing. It seems really well organized. Like the driving, at least, that the malls are really nice. I mean, the nicer areas are super nice, and like it seems well organized. And people don't drive that crazy. It's like, I was like, man, what is this place? It's not like Mexico City or Guatemala City. No. Way different. I wanted to talk more about you and how you made it here. But let's talk about your life back in the U.S. So you said you're from New York. You also said you lived in Texas, right? What did you do back in America?
So in the U.S. For at this point 25 years, so almost 20 years before we moved here, I worked in a business and technology consultancy. So we primarily did software services for companies, a lot in like hospitals, and IT outsourcing. So really commonly, our bread and butter is that companies will come to us and either outsource an entire IT department to us or large chunks of it, like a discrete, like maybe all their help desk, maybe their CIO services, could be anything. But smaller companies will be like just everything. And so we've been doing that a long time. And then obviously the next question is, what do I do here? And because of that type of business, like we just moved a bunch of the executive staff here. So we've been here doing the same thing. I've had no break to that in 25 years.
Okay, so this is a business you started back in New York, was it?
It is. I started it in with a business partner in upstate New York, just outside Rochester. For those who don't know, Avon, New York, in 1999. So been doing this a long time.
That's fantastic. Well, it's good to hear that your business has had such a long run and it's still running strong, and you can do it from here as well. Having that flexibility and that ease of work online and with the modern day technology is fantastic, isn't it? I'm able to do what I'm doing because of that as well. Do you also have other jobs in the US or other projects that you're doing?
Everything I do in the U.S. is through that company. Yeah. So kind of no, but we over the years we've broadened quite a bit. So we have web hosting and telephony companies. We do marketing and staffing and a lot of different things. So we have a pretty broad base of things that we do remotely, because we've always been remote, actually. Even in the 90s, we started as an all-remote company. And that was one of our kind of initial tenets, was IT could be remote. And our very first customers were major hospitals that needed remote systems. And so we started building those, and we just never ended up having offices. And so we built kind of the whole company around that as being a better place to work with better working environment. And it's been fantastic. And so we've branched out in what services we offer, but we've always done it through the same, everyone's working remotely. And now we've become a very large company, which is very exciting.
So you're one of the OG remote workers, one of the digital nomads, like the guy that kicked it all off.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I started, I was doing more traditional work in like 97 to 98. And then in 99, when we did this, we were like, okay, we can do customers in town. That was in like February. By June, our biggest customer was in Washington, D.C., which is only like 6 hours away from New York, but it's not around the corner. And so we were working remote at least part of the time from basically day one almost. And it was forced on us. We didn't have any option. And it was never a, we're going to work remote and it's like this specialty thing. It was just, this is how you work at that point. Yeah, like what else could we do? And then we, because of our growth and being a small company, all of our founders were like, well, I got to live in Pittsburgh and work, and I got to live in Washington, D.C. and work, and we're all working together remotely all the time. So it was very organic.
It always worked like that, and it's always been very easy to work in that way, huh?
Yeah, and I think when you start off that way, when you grow up with that, right? Because I was young at the time that we started the company. It was just, we had to get our work done, and especially being entrepreneurs, it's like if you don't work, you don't eat. So we were working really hard and collaborating with each other and working with our customers and trying to find new customers. And we had customers all up and down the East Coast in those early days. We were relatively, I mean, it's probably a 800-mile zone, but it was a big zone. And we would run around, and you couldn't lose contact with other customers. You had to always just do all those things. So it felt very normal, and I don't know, never really occurred to us. But then when we had the ability to have offices, it was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would we pay for that as an entrepreneur? Imagining taking money out of my pocket and saying, oh, $1,000 a month for an office that no one needs. I don't want to do that, right? That's like, no. So,
it's wasting money.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting story. And I didn't realize you had that background. I mean, you have a lot of videos about technology and stuff. I checked out some of that stuff, and we're going to get back to that a little bit later about your YouTube. Let's talk about what made you first start to travel abroad, move abroad, and what places you went to when you did that.
Sure. So I grew up in Western New York, and where I grew up, like Canada is right there, right? So growing up, the idea of leaving the U.S. and going to Canada was even a, what do you feel like doing for dinner tonight? My family would actually do that sometimes. Like, oh, Friday night, got home early, Toronto, we're off. And so we had this kind of like, it's easy to be international. But we never went overseas or anything like that. My parents were kind of the first of moving more distant than a lot of my family, because we're from the Midwest. And when I got married, my wife and I always talked about, oh, we'd really like to travel the world some, but it took us a long time before we did it. We were married for about 4 years. We had a big client that took me and moved us to Wall Street. And I worked actually on Wall Street representing one of the Wall Street firms for a long time. And it was a fantastic experience. Like, that was wonderful. While we were there, it really gave us both a financial ability to be like, we could take a trip. And all of my customers were in London. So they're like, oh, yeah, you want to go to London and work out of the London office? Knock yourself out. So I had an office in London. I had an office in Belfast. And so we're like, we're just going over and exploring. We had never been anywhere but the US and Canada. And we flew over, and it was all work. Like, everything was work. But we went and saw a bunch of England, went and saw Northern Ireland, and had this amazing time. And we're like, it was so easy to go over. And we're like, why have we avoided this? Why have we felt that there's this barrier that we had to, like, I don't know, overcome something to go? Yeah. Or we got to do this more. And my job kept me very busy. I visited Germany because I'm a history buff, and I went for a really major anniversary in 2009. Spent a bit of time traveling solo, which I just did a YouTube video about my solo travel.
I watched that one. Very good. Very good.
Thank you. That was like eye-opening to me. Like, I can just go. It doesn't matter what I do. Like, these things are easy, right? And we had done a lot of domestic travel. It was just the international. It kept feeling like there were barriers. Like, I don't know what they were, but something makes it that you can't just hop a plane and go somewhere. Of course, it's not true.
It's that cultural thing of the U.S. kind of like thinking that we have everything inside and why go outside, right?
Well,
I think that's part of it, at least.
That's certainly for a lot of people. I think for us, and something that I've sensed a lot. Well, for example, I just went to South America for the first time last month, and I know that this is a factor. So I'm like, I know once I go to South America, I'm going to constantly feel like South America is around the corner. But until I go to South America, it feels like a far off place with a bunch of unknowns. I don't know what those unknowns would be. Like, obviously, it's just as easy. Like, I live in Nicaragua. How can, like, Colombia be exotic? It's not. And I used to live like 100 miles off the Colombian border. Obviously, it's not exotic. You could smell it. Is that street food going on?
Medellin coffee, right?
Right. Yeah, it's coffee wafting over. Yeah. So like, obviously, those places are not exotic in that way, but it still feels that way. But I just flew through Lima, and I went to La Paz. And I was all over Bolivia, and suddenly all of the top half of South America feels like at the drop of a hat I can zip down there. And of course, it's funny. Like, I know this about myself, and I think a lot of people are this way. I still feel like Chile and Argentina are like super exotic and hard to get to. I could have driven there, right? Like, they were so close, but you have this barrier feeling. So for us, like, getting to Europe, like first to the UK and then to continental Europe, was like breaking down this barrier. Wait, we could go anytime. And then I was really busy with work. That was the hardest thing. Is I didn't have vacations. I was working 7 days a week. I was on call because I was the last point of escalation for a lot of stuff on Wall Street. And because of that, I really could never be away easily. So in 2012, we managed to get this big block of time, and we had a year that we knew it was coming. It was just a long thing with like all my schedule, how it worked out at work. So we knew we were gonna have 2 months to do something. So I worked out with work. I'm like, I'm going to Europe. We're doing this thing. And they're like, cool. So we spent a year planning an epic backpacking grand tour of Europe. And we knew that at that point, we already had this like really strong feeling that we wanted to move abroad. We were starting to have kids. I have 2 kids now. They were very little at the time. The one was a baby in 2011. She was born in 2011. So when we went in 2012, she was in a backpack, right? We were backpacking. It was a child we were backpacking. And we wanted to answer a bunch of questions about living abroad all in one go. So we did a number of tourist things. So like, okay, we have to see this. We have to see that. Like, I had to see the Rhine. We had to see Vienna. There's all these places I felt like I just needed to see, and I didn't want to miss them. Places. Right, like our personal bucket list stuff. Yeah. Barcelona was huge for my wife especially. And but then, so we did half the trip of that, and half the trip of these are places that we researched that felt livable. And so one of them was like the Alsace in France. Like, what if we want to live there? Maybe and one was northwestern Italy. What if that? And so one was Portugal. And so we mixed this trip, and we spent 2 months backpacking Europe and just went everywhere, did everything. And that just took all mental barriers that we had and just got rid of them. We felt like we could go anywhere, do anything, anytime, with confidence. We could take trains, planes. Everything was easy. And we did it with kids. We did it with luggage we were carrying. Like, we did it the hardest possible thing for the longest possible time. And after that, we were like, okay, we got back. I told my job, by next year, I'm moving abroad one way or another. If I can stay with the company, great. And if I can't, tough. And then when the time came, they're like, "Oh, we decided you can't move," and I'm like, "Well," and they're like, "I know," and I moved on. I ended up taking another job, and it took us a little while before we could move away, but shortly thereafter, we ended up moving first to Spain, and then moved around, kind of bouncing back and forth between Europe and Latin America. But basically, we more or less left the U.S. essentially at the beginning of 2015.
2015. Okay, so it's 2023. It's about 8 years ago.
It'll be 9 years.
9 years now. Yeah, a couple weeks. So let's talk a little bit about your job that you just mentioned. This was your company you were working for before. Did you separate from your company when you went to Spain that time?
I did not. No. So for a long time, my company was relatively small. Like if anyone has ever started their own company, right? There's a lot of times where you're like, paying the bills is tough, right? So we got really lucky that one of our partner companies, this is going way back, this is the early 2000s, one of our partner companies came to us and said, look, we know you guys have a lot of flexibility because you're entrepreneurs and like you have a lot of expertise. We've got a position that we can't fill. Can you potentially do this kind of as a favor? And they actually originally said, we don't even need you to take the job. Just do an interview, win the job. You can turn it down if you want. We just have to prove that it's not us. Like they failed to give you a good enough offer. I'm like, all right, this is an important favor. And I ended up absolutely loving the team that I interviewed with, and everything went great. And they made such an astounding offer that we're like, look, you know that I own my own company, or there was some, I don't know how much we divulged, but there was like, they're like, yeah, none of that's a problem. We're just going to pay you through that company and like do it all that way. So we ended up basically taking on a Wall Street firm as a customer, just in a very isolated way. So I was still with my company. I at no point had to, separate from my company, do anything like that. To do this, it was always stuff we were able to work out. I did take from time to time hiatuses from working for myself because like I worked for a company that's like, you don't have to get rid of your company, you don't have to stop, but you can't do it during the day. Had a little bit of that, but very little. And then I did take in Spain for a little while. I took a nonprofit job for months, and it was like, okay, we're going to try out a nonprofit thing, see how this works. And it was toxic as all get out. It was a California firm. It was absolutely the worst working environment. I was so spoiled from working on Wall Street, which I know when people haven't done it.
It's a weird thing to hear. Like,
right. Wall Street, New York City, there's a bunch of things that people are like, I don't know about this. But the reality is that while the working hours are long, while it's a high pressure environment, they also recognize that. And it tends to be a very healthy working world where people are super professional. They care about you doing a good job, which sounds weird, but like
as opposed to the Wolf of Wall Street, when you watch that, don't watch that if you're trying to. No, I'm sure that's an exaggerated example.
Also kind of real, but there was a lot of crazy stuff for sure. But it's also like people really cared about each other. They'd be like, money wasn't the bottom line. The company wasn't everything. Like it was a completely different culture than you imagine. And then you get out to California and go work for a nonprofit and everything's toxic. Everyone's out to hurt each other. No one's a team. It was, nobody cared about anything. All they cared about was fake team building exercises that alienated people. It was awful. It was absolutely terrible. And so I was actually working for them when I was in Spain and in Panama. I went back to the United States to work for them for a little bit. At that point, my company was like, we got some ideas. You could come back full time. And the company that I was working for said, "Oh, we don't know about you working in Panama. We decided you have to move to San Francisco." And I'm like, and I decided I'm moving to Nicaragua. So tough.
Well, that's good for you, and it's good for me. I'm not moving there. I'm actually moving to Nicaragua. Goodbye.
And that was the end of it. I'm like, never again. It was so toxic that I'm like, that wasn't. It was great that I got to have an office in Spain, did a couple of interesting things. It wasn't all bad, but it was short-lived and really proved that it was worth working for ourselves all the time. And I managed to move into a lot more of what I wanted to do. I was a lot less in the trenches. So me having some time separate really let the company mature because they've been dependent on me for a long time, which is tough as an entrepreneur. Like you tend to get pulled into those things. And my co-founder gave up. He left the industry because he couldn't take it, being the owner. And so when I came back, I really moved into an education role, a training role. I did a lot of writing. I worked for a lot of our customers in kind of a content creation role, very technical, right? Nothing interesting and fun, but it was a great experience for me. So I got to spend a lot of my time writing and doing that kind of stuff, which then led my first year here. I actually wrote a book as part of my first year. So.